You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Tropical Storm Isaias is keeping us guessing, as always. It's now up to 70 miles per hour once again, and could be about to reach hurricane status, maybe at a push. National Hurricane Center aren't expecting it to happen, but they are a little bit concerned, and hurricane watches are back in effect for the potential landfall area a little bit later on. In the next 2 days in the South Carolina-North Carolina border. So we're looking at the storm right now. There it is right in front of us. It's still just off the coast of Florida, and it looks like Florida will get away with this without too much bad effects from the storm. It's moving nearly towards the north now. It's still north-northwest, but getting rather close to due north at this point. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team in this live coverage hour, and we've got a busy night tonight because we've now pulled the trigger. We've gone an hour early tonight because compared to the previous nights of coverage, because we're actually doing another hour of live streaming at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Tropical Storm Hagupit in the Western Pacific for our Asian interests. That's 8 a.m. in China, so we're also covering that tonight as well. Anyway, let's introduce everyone. We're joined by Alan, Codemo, Preston, Kay, Strat, and Tim. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening, Nathan.
I know they were all in unison.
Hello, Nathan.
Hello. So this storm is keeping us guessing, as I said in the outset. Let's first talk to Tim, because you're in line from this storm right now.
Yes, Nathan, I am. And the NAC track has updated as the 5 o'clock advisory. Projected track does take this to within 55 miles of United States headquarters. And that is very concerning, especially when you look at the watches and warnings that we do have. We do have those hurricane watches now going up to Surf City, North Carolina, down to the North Carolina-South Carolina border. However, the NAC cone really does not do this justice with those warnings, because a lot of those warnings do extend inland. And I actually have the National Weather Service Enhanced Data Display radar up on my screen, and it'll really visualize just how much of a magnitude this storm is really going to have that the NAC cone really doesn't illustrate.
So go through it with us, please.
All right, well, we'll start down here at the south, down in Florida, where we do have the tropical storm warnings going along the water lines of the Florida coastline. They do extend in a little bit from inland, so places like Orlando up to Jacksonville towards Savannah, you guys are under a tropical storm warning, even though you're inland from the coastline. And you can see those tropical storm warnings also go to the area southeast of Columbia. This would be your Charleston up towards the Myrtle Beach area. And then you have the hurricane watches for the Wilmington area and the Myrtle Beach area well inland from the coastline. Going up from there, more tropical storm warnings north of the Surf City, Topsail Beach area, right up to where the Pimlico Sound is to the end of the Outer Banks. And then those warnings go inland from the Jacksonville area right up to United States headquarters and into a few counties south of Raleigh. From there, you have the tropical storm watches to the west of U.S. headquarters. This would be towards the cities of Rayford and Hoke County in that area, and up towards Raleigh. And then going up towards the Virginia coastline, you see those tropical storm watches extend all the way up through the Virginia area, up towards the D.C. area, and it's kind of obscure because there are other watches and warnings going on, but that does include the Delaware area, up towards the New Jersey, Philadelphia area, and up towards the New York City area. So we do have some tropical storm watches up towards that area.
To compound things at the moment, let's take a look at the wide shot of the United States. Of course, you can see the storm down there, but also we have severe thunderstorm watches for parts of New Mexico, Colorado, and you've got a tornado watch up there near where Strat is right now.
Yeah, since we're still talking U.S. weather, yeah, there is a tornado watch that is not related to impacts from Isaias. That is for the northern New York area up towards the western Massachusetts and Connecticut area. That tornado watch will go towards 10 p.m. Again, that is not in relation to the impact from Isaias.
Yep, so there's that double threat right now, I suppose, also under the Tropical Storm Watch, but they won't coincide at the same time, at least. Let's see if I can get the clear radar now on the screen and see how Isaias is doing at this time. And you've got to say the radar composition is looking better. I doubt that's just because it's closer to the radar, because it is, but there's quite a significant amount of red on the northern side, which is certainly the stronger. I mean, there's hardly anything on the southern side that we can see.
And it's quite impressive, to say the least, that there's so much activity with thunderstorms trying to blow up and actually strengthen the system, at least marginally, compared to this morning. Because a few hours ago when we were looking at this, the center was trying to get exposed again. But new convection flare-ups really, especially over the northern side, have kept this going much better than people were assuming that it would be this morning.
Yeah,
Myself included.
Yeah, it is a storm that has always been keeping us guessing since the very beginning. We've always been a little bit iffy on the exact what this storm would do in regards to intensity, and it's showing it off once again with it beginning to strengthen right here.
Yeah, and the key word there is beginning. Whether it will finish is another matter before it gets savagely destroyed by wind shear for the 10th time. Do you think this is for the long haul up until landfall, or do you think it will be more, up and down in intensity?
It's going to be really hard to see this strengthen continuously to landfall any more than it has, other than maybe a marginal gain back to minimal hurricane strength, and that's why the hurricane watch is in place, because still right now it's facing strong wind shear of 25 to 30 knots, and it's really only going to have a time period of about 12 to 18 hours or so when it really begins to move more north-northeast and northeast, compared to its still north-northwest direction. That shear is going to lessen a bit over it to give it really a little bit of time to continue to organize better, as it's been trying to do today despite that shear. And that's why the National Hurricane Center isn't calling for this to become a hurricane again. But the fact that they've put up a hurricane watch shows that they aren't discounting the possibility that it could happen again.
And the wind field at this point isn't really enormous, is it? You're looking at this graphic here on the right-hand side. The eastern side of the storm is the largest wind field, and on the western side, it barely reaches the Florida coast.
Yeah. And that's been pretty fortunate so far, because it's been keeping those tropical storm force winds just lapping at the coastline, barely coming onshore or barely moving inland. As of the 5 p.m. advisory, they're saying that tropical storm force winds with Isaias extend 60 miles out in the northwestern quadrant, and notably 0 miles in the southwestern quadrant. So there's no tropical storm force winds in the southwestern quadrant, according to the National Hurricane Center, based on the recon data they've been getting.
A very unlikely hurricane to have 0 winds on the southwest quadrant.
Well, it is interesting to note, Nathan, that looking at that last graphic with the wind field, it definitely does correlate to all the convection that we're seeing on your radar there, where the heaviest winds are right there in those oranges and reds, and that southwestern side's not going to have any winds for the simple fact there's no convection there to help support it.
And it's been a while since I last saw a watch and warning area extend this far. You can see it there from halfway up Florida all the way to Rhode Island.
And that's really an attribution to how quickly the storm's expected to move as it gets picked up by this trough. By day 3 right now, this thing's expected to be over far northern Maine and could even be in Canada if it moves slightly faster than anticipated right now. So that's why all those tropical storm warnings are already issued, even though it's still down at Florida's latitude for the time being.
In fact, it's showing that it could be in the Chesapeake area by Tuesday, 8 a.m., and it could already be by Maine at 8 p.m. of the same day. So that just shows how fast the storm is going to start to move.
You can see on this graphic, you can almost see the track has been painted out. This is the rainfall expectations, and those numbers are really starting to increase, actually. We've got a few oranges now onshore. South Carolina, small area of North Carolina, a little bit more of Virginia, and quite a bit of Maryland there at the 6 to 10 inch mark. So what do we make of that change?
I mean, it's going to be concerning for larger portions of the northeastern United States, especially in the mid-Atlantic as well, because as we just noted, this is probably going to be occurring in a relatively short time span as the tropical storm starts to move very quickly to the northeast. And this is an upward revision to this morning's forecast.
It certainly is.
Now, again, like last night, they're saying a wide swath of 4 to 6 inches of rain possible from South Carolina all the way up to Vermont, with those splotches of 6 to 10 inches localized, potentially a risk there for the Maryland region.
I think there's even one yellow pixel in Maine there as well.
Yeah, there really is. And so that would be a concern for flash flooding. And because of this upward revision, the National Hurricane Center and the Weather Prediction Center have significantly expanded the zone of moderate risk for flash flooding, which is at least 20%, up significantly into the mid-Atlantic now.
So we think this storm could cause serious flooding issues.
I mean, yeah, it's already shown it has the capabilities when it was down in Hispaniola with some of the flooding that occurred there. And in the same regard, I feel like that could happen in the United States.
It very well could, especially with a lot of these smaller creeks and streams. Those will most likely end up flooding their banks, getting onto local roadways. Your larger rivers are most likely going to have a significant river rise. I know the Cape Fear River runs through U.S. headquarters, and with the rainfall that we're anticipating, we could see the river rise jump almost 20 to 25 feet on the river gauges, and that's not going to impact us locally, but when you go further down the river, that is going to allow some potential river flooding in and around some of the local areas.
So if you've just joined us, the headline is that Isaias is strengthening again, I'm afraid to say, because that means we're here again, and I'd rather not be here. I'd rather not have to tell you about more storm impacts, but that is the case. A storm surge warning was issued recently. It's in effect from Edisto Beach to Cape Fear. A storm surge watch from Cape Fear to Duck, North Carolina. A hurricane watch for South Santee River to Surf City. A tropical storm warning extended northward to Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. A tropical storm watch extended all the way to Watch Hill, Rhode Island, including the Chesapeake Bay, the tidal Potomac River, Delaware Bay, Long Island, and Long Island Sound. And the tropical storm warning has been discontinued south of Sebastian Inlet, Florida. So those are the latest warnings, and let's just see, just pointing out an observation as well. A weather station at Sebastian Inlet recently measured a wind gust of 49 miles per hour. You can also send in questions live on the stream during this hour of coverage if you've just joined us. A reminder of what the schedule is. You might be surprised to see that we've gone an hour early tonight on Isaias from our usual schedule. We are running from 6 till 7. That's because from 8 till 9 we're doing another stream, this time on Tropical Storm Hagupit, which is in the Western Pacific, moving over the Japanese islands and Taiwan, headed for China, and also, we believe, worthy of live coverage tonight. So it's very busy over here. Let's now go and have a look at... Who should we look at? Let's take a look at Codmo's imagery, actually. You've got one of the live webcams?
I do, yes. It's a webcam of a beach in Melbourne, Florida.
And there's people out there?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, if you could see, the wind is, pretty strong.
Blustery. There's a lot of people out there.
Yeah, there's some people on that dock. I think they're just taking pictures or videos of the situation.
Yeah.
And then there's also someone brought their kids, which I don't recommend taking your kids to a beach during this kind of storm.
Not the best idea ever.
But yeah, it's quite a big thing.
Yeah, the wave action off of that camera does look very menacing. You're probably looking at 5 to 7 foot waves. You can see some really strong white caps as those waves do crash in. So definitely the rip current threat is very prevalent with that live shot that we're seeing there.
And we're getting
Yeah,
some questions now about the northeastern United States again. I think it'll be good to go over those and then a little bit of the timing
Sure.
as well. Someone's asking about impacts for southern Connecticut. And as a southern Connecticut resident, I can say the potential for tropical storm force winds is definitely there. Um, we're in a zone around 50% odds now in the next 5 days, and that'll probably go up as the storm continues to track northward. The cone really shows from midday Tuesday to early Wednesday. That's really going to be your impact time frame. And if you're along the coast in southern Connecticut, the general forecast right now is about 2 to 4 inches of rain for the coastline. If you're a bit further north, then you're looking at 4 to 6 inches for portions of southern New England. But overall, it's a pretty significant threat because a lot of that rainfall will be coming down in a relatively short time frame. But as long as you're prepared and staying up to date with the latest information, you'll be okay.
All right. It looks like we've got multiple things going on even now. There is a tornado warning not far from you, Strat.
Oh no, I didn't see this. Oh, it's a bit north of me. It's in Connecticut though. So if you're up in western Connecticut but further north, so I think that's Danbury County ish. It's a bit north of Fairfield County. Make sure you're just staying prepared.
Actually, Strat, that is Berkshire and Litchfield County, northwestern Connecticut, southwestern Massachusetts. In effect till 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, this is not related to the impacts from Isaias.
So we've got multiple situations across the US today, although Isaias, most of the convection is staying offshore, and I doubt we're getting huge rainfall amounts. We'll get that rainfall chart up again shortly, the one we were looking at earlier today, to see what the accumulations have amounted to. Now, I'd be surprised if there are many areas above an inch. We'll get that as soon as we can. Let's see if we can take a look at a different screen then for the time being. Let's see what Preston's showing us. I think he's showing a satellite and radar there. Obviously he can't speak right now, so I don't know if you guys wanted to comment on the imagery there.
It's definitely a good way to look at the storm. It is kind of revealing of what this storm is doing right now, in regards to the coastline and all that.
I mean, it's indicative of the fortunate scenario with Florida, this thing staying a bit east of the forecast last night, to where the worst impacts of rainfall and wind have really stayed offshore for the most part and are mostly just lapping at the coastline. Although you can say notably some squall lines associated with the outer bands have been crawling through the state during the day, and those have definitely been delivering, at least locally, heavier rainfall for certain time periods as they pass through areas in Florida.
Yeah, another thing I'm seeing is that the rain bands are already producing rain up until western Florida. We can see there's some wind, what it seems to be Naples, Fort Myers, and there also seems to be rain in the Tampa area. So the storm's bands are relatively big, but the strong part just stays outside the continental United States for now.
Here's the rain accumulations. 1 inch of rain starts just around where red turns into the sort of pink-purple colour. That's 1 inch. So not many areas over land are experiencing that amount of rain. 2 inches is around where that purple becomes pink towards the white colours. And in the very dark blues there, where the centre of the storm is, you're looking at about 8 inches in those areas. But as you can see, large amounts of the rainfall are staying away, and there's only just a small handful of places that have an accumulation of over 1 inch in central Florida right now.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned rainfall, the same sort of band that we were seeing of 4 to 6 inches of rain going through South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and up the East Coast seems to be strengthened, and now there seems to be now that it seems that there's going to be 6 to 10 inches all across eastern Maryland, a small patch in Virginia, and one in the border between North Carolina and Virginia. So rainfall is going to be strong in the overall eastern United States.
And a question about rainfall, actually, pretty relevant for portions of coastal New Jersey. Someone asking about the general Cape May area. The latest forecast gives you guys the significant possibility of tropical storm force winds, since the center of the storm could be passing quite close or over Cape May in about 2 days' time, later on in Tuesday afternoon. The current forecast also calls for about 2 to 4 inches of rain there as well. So stay on guard and prepared for that, especially if you're in a low-lying area. I wouldn't be surprised if they extend some storm surge watches a bit further up as well, because right now, parts of Maryland even could see 1 to 3 feet. But make sure you're just staying up to date with the latest information and in tune with your local weather office as well.
Tim, what are we looking at on your screen?
This is actually the same thing you were showing on yours, Nathan. I just happened to have it a little bit more finely tuned. This is the total rainfall amount as of 7:56 this morning Eastern time, and there's a lot of high amounts. I have one spot that I found that is 6.12 inches. This is well offshore, not
6.1.
not impacting any land, but you can see the yellows and oranges indicative of over 5.5, almost 5.75 inches. So
Well, I think we were getting
definitely a lot of
8s
rainfall
either this
offshore.
morning or yesterday, so 6 is now near the centre. Let's see if we can take some questions then. Start your message with Force 13 if you have any. It will light up for us in the chat on the YouTube video. Let's
I
see
see a
if we have any.
question. Do you think that this could become a Category 2 over the Gulf Stream since it's still offshore? Well, it's a tricky question, I would say.
The simple answer is that even though it's going to be over the Gulf Stream, most of its journey is still going to have pretty high wind shear. Right now, even, it's still under 25 to 30 knots of shear. It's going to have a small time period of 12 to 18 hours or so between when it turns to the north, northeast, and northeast, and when it makes landfall in the Carolinas, to where shear is going to be lessened as the direction of the storm's movement lines up with the upper level winds a bit better. But the forecast right now is not even calling for this to become a hurricane again. It calls for it to hold its intensity, although there is the chance that it becomes a minimal hurricane again. There's a reason a hurricane watch is up right now, but it would be extraordinarily unlikely for this to become a Category 2 in the short time frame that it would really have in more favorable conditions.
Even though it is very favourable.
Absolutely.
Well, the
also,
temperatures.
Yeah. Someone in chat asked about 94L. I just wanted to essentially check on it.
Well, there it is. This is the wide shot of the Atlantic. And it is starting to get a little bit of momentum. I think National Hurricane Center have made it a moderate chance now in the next 48 hours, haven't they?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
40-60 right now.
40,
Surprised they're
60.
getting at 40 in the next 2 days. That's
Although I will say, notably, models have really backed off on supporting its development pretty heavily still. They
Yeah.
haven't picked up on it again like they were 2 days ago, even though it's starting to look a bit better organized and has a 60% chance of development into tropical depression in the next 5 days. So based on what the National Hurricane Center says at 8 p.m., it's going to be interesting to see how the models run overnight into tomorrow, trying to see if they pick back up on this disturbance again.
Yeah. Another question I'm seeing, Grand Bahama is still getting very heavy downpours and wind gusts. How much longer will this last?
Can't be much longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Shear is still departing convection to the north and east of the center, and now Grand Bahama, at least, is significantly to the south. They shouldn't be getting tropical storm force winds anymore, fortunately, but leftover convective activity could linger there at least for a little bit longer. As we head into tomorrow, though, the conditions should really clear out.
Certainly
Yeah,
by
right
then.
now the storm is moving at about 9 miles an hour, north-northwest. So, yeah, overnight we could see it just, leaving the area overall.
We got a question for someone else in chat, and thank you so much for the contribution. Someone's asking about the Charleston area of South Carolina, and I'm pretty sure as the last update from the National Hurricane Center, the wind probabilities for Charleston were about 44% odds of tropical storm force winds for that area as the 5 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. Generally, unless you're at the exact landfall spot of the system, in the Carolinas if it becomes a minimal hurricane again. You're really looking at rainfall to be the most significant threat, and Charleston could be getting some totals around 4 inches to 4 to 6 inches. So stay up to date with your local weather office for your exact location regarding that.
So I see a question by I believe it's Tracy. What do you think about the coast on the South Carolina North Carolina border? Do you think it'll still be do you think it's still possible that a TS will hit, or do you think it'll still be Category 1 by then?
Well, we're not really forecasting Category 1 just yet because the National Hurricane Center aren't. I only heard the second part of your question. Where was that again?
The coast on the South Carolina North Carolina border.
It's certainly, you can't rule out a hurricane, and certainly hurricane force gusts, I should imagine.
Yeah,
No.
The easiest way to put it is there's a hurricane watch there for a reason. So if you're living along the South Carolina, North Carolina border, it's better to be safe than sorry and prepare as if you're going to be getting hit by a Category 1 hurricane than to just do nothing in regards to the system.
Frandy's Weather Channel, thanks very much for supporting us, by the way. Will Allentown, Pennsylvania get major impacts?
4 to 6 inches are expected of rain. And that's, I think, the thing you have to be most cautious about.
Yeah, especially, again, once we're getting up more in the northeastern United States, the consensus right now is that the center should pass a bit east of Allentown in Pennsylvania. But again, rainfall, once you get northeast, is going to be the largest concern, especially when, according to the forecast, much of it could be occurring in a relatively short time span. So if you're in a flood-prone area to flash flooding, in Pennsylvania near Allentown, make sure that you're paying attention for flash flooding risks associated with the system, and stay up to date with your local weather office for your exact location in Allentown as well.
Yeah.
Another question. Yeah. I'm seeing
there's loads more questions.
I'm sorry. Another question I'm seeing is, will New Hampshire get tropical storm winds? Well, the count seems to be show that there's a chance.
Yes, I would say so.
Right now, the thing you have to take a look at is rain, 2 to 4 inches in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting dynamic.
There's a patch of 4 to 6 inches in central New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's going to depend really where in New Hampshire you are exactly. So make sure, you're looking at Weather Prediction Center, your local weather office for that exactly. But the interesting dynamic with this system that it's going to be spending a lot of time over land, but because of baroclinic forcing, as it undergoes an extratropical transition and expands in size, it's not going to lose as much intensity as you'd expect from a tropical cyclone being over land for about a day and a half at least during its track through most of the eastern seaboard of the United States, according to the latest forecast. By the time it gets to New Hampshire, at least, it's still forecast to have winds of 45 or 50 miles an hour, which is quite significant still for a system that would be inland for that long already.
We had loads more questions here. Let's see if we can condense as much as we can. Why is this storm so unpredictable? Well, it doesn't have much structure. That's why we're struggling with it right now, and it's got a lot of energy to expend, but not much going on with it because it's struggling for structure. So it's got huge cloud tops, but they're in and out, phasing in and out and weakening and strengthening and weakening again. By the time it gets to the Carolinas, maybe it will have a little bit of a better structure, and then you can't rule out Category 1 hurricane or maybe even mid-range Category 1 at a worst-case scenario.
And it's not just the structure itself, Nathan. It's the actual track it's been taken. I know we've discussed a few times on air the number of seasons I've tracked. This would be my 26th season, and I have seen very few storms thread the needle between the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and then thread right between the Turks and Caicos and Cuba up towards Andros Island. That's normally not a track that you see these kind of storms take this time of year.
I'm not sure. I mean, this is early August now, and I mean, they take all kinds of tracks, really, don't they? But I guess you do look for development. The ones that are further south towards the Caribbean tend to go through the Caribbean. You don't really get many recurves unless they're way out to sea. This is like a recurve that's not one, really, because it is recurving, but it's over the land areas.
It really goes to the interesting dynamic of this storm early on in its life, as it first really got a closed center, though, because the original low-level center, which formed in the Caribbean Sea, really disintegrated right as the disturbance, or it was Isaias at that time, began to move inland, and then a secondary low-level center circulation developed north of Hispaniola, and that allowed the system to somehow, and very rarely does something like this happen. Usually storms weaken significantly over Hispaniola, but the storm actually managed to drop in pressure, and by the time the new low-level center formed, it was already a minimal hurricane based on the recon data. So, again, you really don't see that very often, and it's a very interesting event to see occur.
Yeah, I think Kay had mentioned something about it a couple days ago, and Kay is actually in studio with us, so he may be able to explain it better. But a lot of that influence came, I believe, from tropospheric influence. I think Kay could explain that a little bit better than the rest of us.
Just before that, I want to get through this one before it disappears. Black Void wants to know if we're going to get a tropical weather bulletin soon. Well, with the tropics as chaotic as they are right now, probably not until at least tomorrow night. Kay.
All right. So,
Kay, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Tim had a question for you there.
Discussing that, I think you called it tropospheric influence with Isaias when it's done by the Republic.
Topographic forcing.
Yes, thank you. Maybe some of the viewers may not be familiar with that. I don't think some of our team is even familiar with it. So maybe
well, I only learned
explain
about
that
it fairly recently. But what it entails is when air flowing down the lee side of mountainous terrain causes the low-level center of a storm to tighten and condense, and it can help a storm to intensify by focusing its energy into a smaller area, basically.
And a phenomenon like that, obviously, once it does recenter, allows itself to tighten up and become, well, what we had was a hurricane.
Yes.
Yeah. Another question I'm seeing: do we need to board up for tropical storm winds?
Where?
What would you say?
I mean,
Well, I guess it doesn't really
if
matter where.
It doesn't. I mean, you can if you feel like you need to. But it's better to be like at some point prepared, like have food just in case. It's really just a just in case situation, really. Just play by play.
You know, as someone on the eastern coast who's been through a tropical cyclone already this season, typically with tropical storms, you don't need to board up your windows. That's typically something to protect them from stronger winds and debris that could be flying around. Although always make sure you have a hurricane plan in place and ready to go. And if you're on the eastern seaboard right now, generally everyone should be watching this very closely and having a plan active and or in place already at this time. There's always important to take household preparations. 50 to 60 mile an hour sustained winds. If you have some loose debris around, it's always better to tie that down rather than let the flight risk take place. And if you really want to be extra safe, never a bad idea to board up your windows if you really think that's necessary.
Yes, and I do want to get to another question before it also disappears. So I know it's a question by Love Command, and he wants to know if we can show the Day 2 and Day 3 Storm Prediction Center outlooks. I assume it's for relating to Tropical Storm Isaias.
Oh dear.
For something like that, normally what the National Hurricane Center and the Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma do is with any tropical cyclone impacts, they will note a 2 and 5% risk in and around the influence of where the tropical cyclone will make landfall. So,
well, there's what Day 2 looks like. Slight area where the potential hurricane will make landfall. Tropical storm as it is right now. And let's get Day 3. You can see the threat is generally less, but you can see it spread out much more across the U.S. East Coast from North Carolina all the way beyond Boston into southern Maine.
And that slight risk is probably going to be driven by that 5% tornadic risk. That's usually what the NHC and the SPC slap on for that slight risk for any tropical cyclone that does make landfall. So, tornadic risk would be there along with the winds, as has been alluded to. So definitely be on the keep your eyes open for potential down power lines, trees coming down. That will be predominantly what your biggest threats are going to be with this tropical storm if you're along the coastline and inland.
It's very interesting to look at from a wide shot because you look at it here, and tropical cyclones are usually pretty circular. If I was to draw around it, you can draw a little circle and you can see all the rotation following it. And then you've got the inner area, and you've got that. In a well-developed hurricane, you would see reds and yellows across that whole eye area, but we've got all this here that's just absolutely dead. There's nothing going on the southern and southwestern side. Indeed, in the case of the western side here, no winds, not so many winds to speak of, no storm force winds at the very least.
Yeah, and that's really showing the impacts of the southerly shear that's really been ripping convection still as it blows up to the north and east of the center. You know, even earlier today, it was looking for a moment that the center might try to get exposed again, but since then, new convection's tried to bubble up and really maintain itself over the center. There's a question, chat, that I think it's going to be important to go over real quick. I think Tim can answer this because it's much closer to his neck of the woods. Someone's asking where the general impacts for Wilmington could be in North Carolina.
For Wilmington, most likely with the center track, if it does hold the NHC cone, Wilmington will be on what we call the dirty side of the storm. So that's where you could predominantly see your strongest winds, your heaviest rain, 2 to 4 inches of rain, if not more, can't be ruled out. Wilmington is under that hurricane watch. So you could see stronger winds, 50, 60, maybe 70 mile per hour gusts in and around the Wilmington area. And you may see some flooding if you're going to be down in around the downtown area and around the USS Battleship North Carolina. So definitely be prepared if you're going to be going in that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something you should always be aware of.
Do we have any recon news?
I've been following that for quite a while, and unfortunately the recon plane that's in there now is a recon mission which isn't doing drop zones and is flying an irregular flight path, so it won't be particularly helpful unless it manages to catch something unusual. However,
That is very
the Air Force plane has just taken off and will be there within an hour, I would hope. It's taken off from Mississippi.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that for you guys at home.
And we're back with that webcam now, and you can see there once again. Where was that again?
Melbourne, Florida.
Melbourne, Florida. So, you know, that is something like 50 miles away from the center of Tropical Storm Isaias right now. The wave's still coming in, and people still spectating there as well. Some somewhat dark clouds in the area, as far as we can see on this webcam, but interesting conditions. I think actually the sun might be out there.
I just want to mention a question I just saw, and it is from Jerry Martin. She's asking if she should close up their shop early. They are from Hilton Head Island, which I believe is in North Carolina.
I mean, I think the best thing to do is listen to what your local officials are saying for your exact location. If you're in that specific area, you know, it's going to be more dependent sometimes on, you know, if your area is more flood prone, for example. If that's the case, then local officials might be ordering shops to close up a little bit early, you know, to stay protected and safe and make sure the proper preparations are in case. So make sure you're staying very close in touch if you're a small business owner with everything that your local officials are saying in regards to preparations for the system.
And it depends what you have to do personally as well. You know, if you've got things that you have to shore up at home and at work, then you'll want to allow some extra time, because how long till it reaches the coast?
Day and a half at most.
Day and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, and for North Carolina impacts, the National Weather Service offices you want to keep an eye on is Wilmington, Morehead City, which that would cover the Outer Banks, and Raleigh if you're looking in around the U.S. headquarters area.
Let's see if we've got any more questions. Will it be bad in Charleston?
I think we covered that one a few minutes ago. But
well, people are coming in and out all the time, Tim.
Yeah, not a problem. I can reiterate it and kind of touch base on it. Current NHC cone does have it coming in just north of the Charleston area. probably up around the Myrtle Beach, Wilmington area based on the current advisory that we have. So you're going to be on the cleaner side of the storm where if it maintains its current structure, Charleston, you may get a little bit of rain, maybe some gusty winds, 30, 40 miles an hour at most, but you're not going to get the worst of it. Now, if this deviates further west, once it starts curving up towards the Georgia and South Carolina area, then Charleston could be in the worst of it. So there's still a lot of uncertainty as what the storm's going to do, if it's going to oscillate more to the west or toward the east, which is why we do have those hurricane watches going from the Sandy T River all the way up to Surf City, North Carolina, and those tropical storm warnings extending further south from there.
Yeah.
Make sure to tag us so that we can see your messages, hopefully. I think that the chat rate is pretty quick, so we'll do our best. What are the worst conditions you could expect in Melbourne, Florida? Well, you just saw the webcam. It doesn't look too bad there at the moment. I'd stay away from the from going into the sea, of course, but the conditions don't look too bad, and that's about the worst they'll get by the looks of things. There may be some rain showers that could produce maybe some significant rain rates, but there's no real sign of that yet.
No, most Melbourne is going to deal with is some feeder bands. It is starting to move to the north of the Melbourne area.
Yeah. And the fortunate thing with this system is similar to Faye, at least in this regard, of earlier in July, there aren't any tropical storm force winds in the southwestern quadrant right now, based on recon data that we're getting, because in part of the wind shear that's pushing convection off to the north and east. So once in terms of latitude, at least, the storm is a bit north of your location, you won't be getting any more tropical storm force winds for the time being, which at least for parts of coastal Florida where conditions have been lapping at the coastline during the day today is extremely fortunate.
Let's take a look at some more satellite imagery there. You might notice towards the center there is a, the cloud top's really flaring up. Some people might incorrectly label it as an eye developing, but it's not happening just yet, because we've seen on the radar that the eye wall, is mostly non-existent. So what you will notice on this storm, probably throughout the rest of its duration, is that convective clouds will be blowing up, but we probably won't get to see, at least on satellite imagery, a discernible eye feature.
Yeah, something else I would just like to point out is how much better organized the storm seems to be than yesterday, even when it had hurricane status.
Well, yesterday it was really struggling, wasn't it?
It was really starting to not do well. I think it was early yesterday, was it?
We almost had our fingers crossed that it was on its last legs.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Unfortunately, since then, convection, blew up over the center as we went live last night. And even though it got sheared off to the northeast and tried to wane a bit, overall convective activity with the system has persisted quite strongly over the past almost a day now, despite the fact that southerly shear is still displacing most of that activity to the north and east of the center.
Yeah. And,
Go ahead.
Okay, go on. No, go on.
I'm just going through tons of questions. Do you think it could maintain hurricane strength as it goes into New England?
Well, first off, it'd have to reach hurricane strength again, which is still overall not forecast by the National Hurricane Center in most models, although there is the off chance that it does do it while turning northeast, where shear is going to be a bit more favorable for it, and that's why there is a hurricane watch in place. So if you are under a hurricane watch, prepare as if there is going to be a hurricane making landfall in your area. But even though baroclinic forcing is supposed to have it weaken only marginally as it tracks up the eastern seaboard, if we're to be inland and make landfall as a hurricane, there's an extraordinarily low chance that would also be a hurricane by the time it got up towards the northeastern parts of the United States. It would still weaken because of land interaction.
As it is right now, the National Hurricane Center are only projecting that 10% chance of a hurricane, of hurricane conditions being felt at sea. So it certainly doesn't look that way. Although the chances of 50 knot winds, that's 60 miles per hour sustained winds, there is a significant 10% plus, which stretches all the way, includes New York City up there towards, the Tropical Storm Watch zone, basically. There are right now. 32 million people under a 10% chance for 60-mile-an-hour winds from this storm, and many people obviously under higher chances than that, especially in the Carolinas right now.
Yeah. Something else. I've been monitoring the Daytona Beach webcam. It seems like in the last 30 minutes, the tides have gone about 10 to 15 feet inland. So, something else we have to take a look at. Well, the tides are growing right now.
But we were talking a couple of days ago about this storm coinciding with high tide. I've lost my bearings with timeliness and when that actually is now. But you can see there's some significant rain on the right-hand side of the image.
And something notable with the system is that there is a wide swath of land right now, all the way from still Sebastian Inlet, all the way up into the Chesapeake Bay, into Maryland and Virginia, that are expecting at least 1 to 3 feet of storm surge inundation from, I think it's Edisto Beach to Cape Fear. That's where the storm surge warning is. They're expecting 2 to 4 feet of inundation possible. So even though the overall surge is expected to be pretty minimal, it still poses significant threat to low-lying areas.
So that webcam was Daytona Beach, correct?
Yes, it was. We can still see some people in the beach, which is kind of concerning.
We just look at the radar here. You can see, nothing too major, but some rain showers that are moving in there. So that's what we're looking at on the camera. Yeah, it's fairly quiet, but there's still quite a few people out there.
Yeah, there is still, and just 5 minutes ago, I saw a kid just going into the waves, which was a bit concerning to say the least. But yeah, it seems like people are actually leaving because just about 20 minutes ago, there were like, what, I could count about 30, 40 people in the beach.
Yeah, well, time's getting on.
Yeah.
And I'd like to reiterate the importance to people that are along coastal areas. As this system passes, even if you're down in Florida and the storm is much further north heading into Tuesday, it's best not to go out and go for a swim or try to surf or anything, because swells and dangerous rip currents that could be life-threatening associated with the system will still be there even as the storm moves away. So people there right now that are going into the water or trying to go near the water, definitely an overall very bad idea in general. And please don't do what these people are doing on camera.
That's how most people go in this situation. They get taken by the rip.
Certainly getting rather heavy out there.
So I just want to mention really quick that definitely take the rip current seriously, because I have heard, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but there's already been a surfer who has died due to these rip currents, I believe.
And that's unconfirmed.
So
I don't
far
know
the
if we
death
get news on that. But at the moment, we don't have news on that for sure.
And someone in the chat is really putting it well. They're saying they were in Texas when Hannah came through, and it was amazing to see how many people were on the beach driving around and then getting stuck. And they're imploring people to stay home and not drive. And that is exactly correct. Especially if it's more of an atoll area, it's more of an island chain that isn't too far elevated off of the sea surface. Please don't go out to those areas. I get that sightseeing may be considered exhilarating or fun sometimes, but even if the storm's staying slightly offshore, it's not worth potentially putting yourself in a hazardous condition just for a nice picture or two.
Yeah, especially don't go in the water. Please don't surf, don't swim, don't boogie board. Boating might even be a little bit dangerous if you really get into the nitty-gritty. I mean, just stay at home. We've been telling you this all the time. I know you keep hearing it with other situations, but please just stay at home. It's not worth it, honestly.
Just looking at another comment there, actually, and it's something that we ought to talk about, because earlier on the European model, the ECMWF, was calling for a potential hurricane landfall in the Carolinas somewhere. I can't remember where exactly. I've only heard that secondhand. Do we have any more information on that? Because it's quite important, given that the ECMWF is looked at very highly in the meteorological community.
I do know something about that.
Weird.
Okay.
I was looking at that exact run earlier, and it seems to show the low-level and mid-level sensors aligning, which they're currently not. They're actually, the vortex of the cyclone is tilted, which means it'll struggle to strengthen much. and it's a sign of the shear it's under. But the ECMWF expects those to align and then for steady strengthening to occur until a landfall just below 980 millibars in pressure.
Yeah, had it at
So
979,
quite a ways
which must be, at least a mid-range Category 1 hurricane.
The latest European run, the 12Z run, has the 48-hour mark as it moves inland between the South and North Carolina border at 989 millibars, but that's already slightly inland. So the European at least shows the potential for some intensification over the next 24 to 48 hours in that time frame, while it's in an environment of less wind shear.
We're happy to take more questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the comments section. Live on the air. How likely is it that we beat 2005 in terms of named storms? That's a burning question for a lot of people out there.
Well, I would say not to compare. Definitely, let's not compare it because these are two different things. And another thing is that there's also that Kelvin wave forming in August, so we may not reach that much for this month. Yes, of course, it was a very hyperactive July, but we should not predict what's going to happen because, well, we don't know.
Key takeaway messages so far, though, is that we're at storm number 9. We've had 10 depressions. Tropical Depression 10 was active just a day or two ago near the coast of Africa. So that's 10 tropical cyclones that we've had in 2020 so far. And in terms of named storms, the average by now is somewhere around 2 or 3. So we are well ahead. Record pace, actually, to begin the season. Some key messages about that. There's no guarantee that this pace will continue, although we do expect there will be some active phases coming up, especially at the end of August, early September, which is the traditional peak of hurricane season. And the other message, which you alluded to there, is that it does appear that we'll be having a quiet spell after the demise of Isaias. We're certainly hoping so, so that we can catch our breath for a week.
The latest ECMWF run that I saw.
No, don't tell me. It's putting up something else?
Madden-Julian oscillation going into a strong favourable phase for the Atlantic later this month.
Later in the month, yeah.
Something really interesting just happened. I don't know if this is going to be verified by the next recon plane that's taking off, so the Air Force plane to come through, and I think Kay can talk about this, but the NOAA plane just did a center fix and got some very interesting pressure readings, Kay.
That's because it's flying at a rather high altitude, so they're not very accurate on this particular mission.
Yeah, that is well.
Drop zones, but when it was outside of the gale force wind radius, it measured a pressure of 1012, then 995, then back to 1004. So it's not very accurate at the moment, I'm afraid.
That's pretty fortunate to know, at least. So we'll get some more accurate data with reconnaissance aircraft, low-level flying. I think you said in about an hour or two as the plane gets to the center of the system.
Well, it's taken off and it started flying in the right direction. It's currently over the Florida Panhandle. It's in half an hour since takeoff. So.
Wow, it's good to always be looking at those kinds of things.
So we'll be getting more information on that as time goes on. We've decided, because there's a lot of questions that are coming in, that we would still stay on for an extra hour probably on this. And that means that the Hagapit part that we were going to do is probably put on the back shelf, but we'll talk about that a little bit more on this stream a little bit later on, and we can show you some images shortly. So we have, just to reiterate, looking around the world at the moment, we have obviously Isaias there off the east coast of Florida, around halfway up now. Invest 94L, which is an area of interest there, just to the northeast of Puerto Rico, a little bit out to sea. That has a 60% chance of formation according to the National Hurricane Center in the next 5 days. And looking towards the east, you can see a few little tropical waves, but nothing significant, nothing that's likely to develop. The Eastern Pacific looks like this, fairly quiet at this time still. There's only been 4 storms in the basin so far, and 4 other depressions makes 8. very below average season so far, even though we did have Douglas that struck Hawaii last weekend. In the Western Pacific, though, we've got these two tropical cyclones, Sinlaku, which is moving well inland now, it's over Laos, and we've also got Tropical Storm Hagapit, which is strengthening and near typhoon status as it moves through the very southern Japanese Ryukyu Islands and is likely to make a landfall in China, the east coast, in about a day or two. So that is also one that we're watching out there.
What are the winds of it right now?
We're giving it 65 miles per hour at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is near typhoon status. Another thing, I saw a comment about the wave in Africa right now. I'm gonna say this. It surprised me, but it seems to be kind of a bit organized. There's a big patch that it's already kind of organized in I would say Western Niger, Eastern Mali, and Eastern Burkina Faso.
But you can't put any stock into these waves whilst they're over Africa. You just can't.
Definitely, I get your point.
It's always interesting to keep an eye out on some of the waves that occur over Africa, in the intertropical convergence zone. But generally, and this is very strong consensus for the models, this is going to get choked off and not develop at all, despite it looking quite vigorous over Africa. There are some questions about the wind probabilities according for Isaias and the potential for flash flooding risk. And I think Tim has both of those graphics up. And for people that are watching this on the Eastern Seaboard, these are both going to be very important to stay up to date with the latest changes in these. So I think we should go over them.
Sure.
That is correct, Strat. First one I have up is the tropical storm force probabilities. This does go over the next 5 days. And the big takeaway that I'm seeing is that most of the tropical storm impacts are going to stay offshore. Once you get towards Wilmington, up towards Jacksonville, Morehead City, it will be a pretty good 50-50 chance, but the main bulk of it looks like it is going to stay offshore as you do go through the next 5 days. May have a few impacts along the eastern seaboard up to New Jersey and up towards the New York City area by the time we do get 3-4 days out. The flood impacts is go ahead, Strat.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to know, at least with the tropical storm force wind probability graphic, that as the storm moves north, that these odds will universally go up for the areas that the storm is closest to or getting closer to. So even though, say, I'll pull a random one out just because I just saw it, Bridgeport is around like 43% right now. In a day or a day and a half, if the current forecast track stayed the exact same, those odds would probably rise substantially.
Absolutely. Yeah. And getting into the flood threat, and I know this is something
this one's probably the most interesting.
Yes, it is, and this is over the next 3 days. So the main one covers the whole 3-day swath, and then you have the two side panels showing it through the day 2 and day 3. And where we were seeing that 4 to 6 and 6 to 10 inch range for rain is where we're going to see the highest risk for excessive rainfall leading to flash flooding. A good chance we're going to see a 20% chance of flash flooding, say south of Charleston, up through Myrtle Beach, up towards Wilmington, here at United States headquarters, up towards Raleigh, maybe Roanoke, getting up into the Alexandria, Virginia area, maybe including the D.C. area. They may be on that 10% risk, but going through northern Delaware, over towards Philadelphia, most of New Jersey, and southern part of New York, that's going to be just outside of the New York City area. And then that 10% risk, Strat, goes up into your area and points north.
Yeah, so especially for the red area, which is, I think it's a moderate risk, right? Or is
yes, 20% risk of flash flooding in that red area.
Yeah, so especially for the moderate risk zone, even more further north, as the system starts to accelerate, a lot of that rainfall could be happening in a relatively short time span. So if you're
some big places in there too.
Yeah, a lot of big cities. Even Philadelphia and a lot of New Jersey there. So if you're in that red, especially, and the yellows and greens as well, keep an eye out for flash flooding for your exact location.
Baltimore too.
I have a question from the good Tom King. Is Isaias?
He can never get that pronunciation right.
I know. I'm trying. Is it going to choke on dry air until it hits the Carolinas?
Well, mainly it's gonna be the wind shear, I would guess, but it's gonna do a combo, just like it has been doing over the well, as it was nearing Florida, it was mainly a combo between wind shear and dryer, so it's gonna still do the same thing.
Yeah, we'll get some water vapor imagery up on the screen shortly, but if you're just joining us, a reminder of the latest watches and warnings that are out there. If you've just joined us, because you may be just getting up to speed, a storm surge warning was issued not so long ago. It's now in effect for Modesto Beach to Cape Fear. A storm surge watch in effect from Cape Fear to Duck, North Carolina. Hurricane watch in effect from South Santee River in South Carolina to Surf City, North Carolina, and the tropical storm warning has been extended northward to Ocracoke Inlet in North Carolina. The tropical storm watch has been extended northward all the way to Watch Hill in Rhode Island, including the Chesapeake Bay, the tidal Potomac River, Delaware Bay, Long Island, and Long Island Sound. The tropical storm warning has been discontinued south of Sebastian Inlet in Florida. So it's a fairly fast-moving storm as it moves through on Tuesday, Wednesday, when it reaches the coast of the Carolinas. And that's why the watches already extend most of the way up the eastern seaboard there.
Yeah, and that's just really another note to the acceleration that this storm is going to take as it gets picked up by this trough. And a bit of note on that as well, the baroclinic forcing that's going to occur as it turns post-tropical or starts the transition moving up the eastern seaboard, that will allow it to not weaken as much as you might expect from a storm that's going to be over land for about a day and a half to 2 days at that point in time. By the time it's up in Maine, it's forecast to be around 45 miles an hour sustained there after a current forecast landfall of 70 miles an hour by the National Hurricane Center. So only marginal weakening generally forecast. So tropical storm force winds could go from the Carolinas all the way up to Maine.
Looking at this water vapor imagery now from Preston, one of the people helping us out here tonight, you can see there a rather moist system, and I'm not seeing too much dry air around there. I imagine that's the upper level. I wonder if you could change to the mid-level, if you can hear me, and that gives a more accurate representation of what the actual conditions look like regarding dry air. We'll see if we can get that up for us shortly. Let's just take a look at the radar once more and show you the areas that are getting the worst conditions right now. There aren't that many that are getting particularly bad conditions. There is a little area of showers moving in near Daytona Beach. You saw that webcam earlier on. Looks like it could be producing quite a bit of rainfall there in those latest frames, but I shouldn't think it'll be anything too serious. And just checking up towards the northeast there as well, that tornado warning I think is still going into
yes.
Is it Vermont?
No, it's not Vermont, it's Massachusetts.
Oh, it's still got Massachusetts to go. I couldn't quite see it on that map there. Yeah,
Massachusetts, they issued a new one as well. That was an extension of it as well. Until 7:30.
Yeah, they did. It's for Hampton and Hampshire counties in western Massachusetts.
So
again, that tornado warning is not associated with Isaias.
Yeah, not quite.
Yeah. Another question I'm seeing from Bra MK: how much rainfall in inches slash feet is possible in the red areas? I would assume you're meaning to the flash flooding graph we showed earlier, and according to the NHC, the National Hurricane Center, we could expect something from 4 to 6 feet in most areas. And some patches in Virginia, North Carolina, and most of eastern Maryland, we could expect something from 6 to 10 inches.
Another question: when do you expect the worst impacts to start or to come into place in New York City, Strat?
In New York City, what you're going to be looking at is in between the afternoon on Tuesday and the morning on Wednesday. Is when the tropical storm is forecast to pass the area using the National Hurricane Center cone. As it turns post-tropical or begins to have some baroclinic activity, that's going to begin the transition when it moves northeastward along the seaboard. The rain shield and convective activity is currently forecast by computer models in the National Hurricane Center to shift more on the northwestern side of the storm. So you're going to really be seeing the worst conditions associated with Isaias in New York City and parts of southern New England, and potentially even parts of the mid-Atlantic before the actual center of the storm passes and after the center passes, it's more likely that conditions on that side of the system will be much less severe or even closer to non-existent, as we're seeing right now with the southwestern side that currently has no tropical storm force winds and very little convective activity.
Yep, so there is again the National Hurricane Center's track map and just how extensive those watches and warnings are at this point. More questions then. The models are saying that Invest 94L will go north and loop to the west.
I don't know which model they're talking about. Maybe a statistical one.
It could be.
The general model consensus is that this comes somewhere near Bermuda in general, but to the southwest of it, and then gets hooked off to the north and east, generally missing Bermuda. I mean, there's a couple ones that kind of stall it out and try to loop it around, but that's mostly because at that point they're not properly picking up on a closed low-level center or just a general area of low pressure. You know, the model support for this is generally quite weak right now. And I think the one he's talking about might be the GFS. That one doesn't even show the system developed at all, even into a closed low. So you really need to discount those unless it's showing a closed center and an actual bona fide tropical cyclone at that point.
A question about Savannah, Georgia there. What are we thinking for that area now?
Savannah, Georgia. I would say that if it does... Okay. Yeah, if it does manage to turn northeast before it reaches Georgia, then I would say there's not much that's gonna go on in Savannah. Just because of how small the wind
and it's on the western side.
Western part. Exactly, that was what I was gonna say. Just because of how big the windfall on the western side is, I wouldn't say there's gonna happen much. Another question I saw very early, which was kind of interesting, would this affect Greenland?
Where? Greenland?
Greenland. Yeah, which is
really
something that we couldn't know. Yeah, that's
Greenland. It's going to take a while before we can answer that question with any certainty.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. A very interesting question, nonetheless.
I mean, back to the Savannah question. That's much more relevant. You know, I'm pretty sure the general model consensus still has this merging with the trough and degenerating around day 3 to 4 right now. But for Savannah, at least, the main threat is going to be some rainfall. Right now, the forecast isn't too significant for most of Georgia, maybe 1 to 2 inches along the very coastal areas with up to 1 inch extending a bit further inland. If you're worried about tropical storm force winds, it's currently 5% chance from the National Hurricane Center for tropical storm force winds in Savannah, Georgia, maybe slightly higher exactly on the coastline. But the general forecast is calling for those winds to stay a bit offshore of Georgia.
Just looking at the satellite imagery once again of the storm, it's very similar to what it was looking like this morning, honestly. Another convective blowout, and you can start to see that maybe, well, no, it is still flaring up at the minute, but I imagine in an hour or two it will start to decay once more, and it's got these peaks and troughs in its intensity phases, and in and out, near hurricane status, dropping off a little bit, getting back up again. I think we'll be seeing that all the way up until landfall.
Yeah, and just like you say about that, this storm has been interesting in that well, instead of like just one normal like convection that's going on all the time, this is like pulsating between moments when the convection blows and then it dies again, and then another moment of another sequence of convection happens. It's more of like a sequence, what's going on.
Yep.
And that does happen with, more heavily shear tropical cyclones where, convection is blown off from the center, but, they're still trying to pulse new convective activity as the vorticity is still quite strong along where the center is as it tries to get exposed. And unfortunately for land impacts, at least right now, that makes it a bit more sporadic at times to forecast exactly what land impacts will be, because it can be more random if when the storm's making landfall or closest approach to one location, you get a random pulse of convective activity that can up the potential winds and definitely up the rainfall totals for a specific place. And then a couple miles or a few dozen miles further north, that pulse is much more dead and you don't get the same impacts at all.
It's looking pretty good on the visible right now, though. Gotta say that much.
Yeah, I mean, much better than earlier today, like around 5 to 6 hours ago when the center was looking like it was trying to get exposed again. So even though the shear is still displacing most of the convective activity to the north and east of the center, not nearly as bare at the center as we were seeing earlier today.
Yeah, and the convection blowup has definitely helped this storm out multiple times. I mean, yesterday and today.
Some more comments about whether that's an eye or not on the infrared imagery. I can tell you almost with full confidence, 99% confidence that it is not.
It is not.
There's nothing on radar.
And if we look at the radar there, you've got hardly anything going on. What you should be seeing, if there's an eye in place, is that there really ought to be a full ring here of yellows wrapping around an eye, which would hopefully have quite a clear gap in it, and maybe even some reds around the eye wall as well, which would denote quite an intense or a stronger eye wall. There's nothing of that at the moment, still heavily sheared. All you've got is this little arch, which is only covering up a quarter at best of what would be an eye wall, and even that's flaky because it's displaced towards that direction as well, up towards the northeast. So it's really struggling in that regard. Probably the most interesting part about this storm right now is some of the sporadic rainfall that's curving in from the northern side of the storm, hitting Daytona Beach right now, and a few other little areas sweeping around the southern part of Florida as well, coming back around, because obviously that's the tail end of the storm down there, maybe even in the Miami area.
Yeah, and just an image that the team sent about a boat that's been wedged up and the wall near Port Canaveral, but rough waters. Just another very important thing. Don't as well as it was said this earlier. Don't try to go on boats right now because that's something that could happen, especially in the areas that have like stronger winds and stuff like that. Just stay at home. Don't try to do anything that you shouldn't do, and listen to your local authorities for more.
You said that was Cape Canaveral?
Yes, Cape Canaveral.
So that's one image of the goings-ons in those areas. Let's see if we've got any more questions then. Do we think it can get a good-looking eye?
I mean, overall, even though there's more convective activity, the actual structure isn't very well defined, even though there is obviously a very tight and well-spun low-level center of circulation. You know, the radar's the best view of that. You have a banding feature on the northern side, of course, that's bringing some strong thunderstorm activity north of the center of circulation. But considering the fact that it's still going to be under 20 to 30 knots of wind shear for at least the next 12 hours or so, and then it's only going to have a period of about 12 to 18 hours where the shear is a bit less as it turns to the north and northeast, and it aligns its direction more with the upper level winds, it'd be very difficult for this to redevelop an eye fully. But you got to keep an eye out for a minimal hurricane landfall in the Carolinas just in case its structure does improve. That there is a reason that the National Hurricane Center put a hurricane watch out.
Yes, indeed. And quite a few questions about North Carolina in particular. So I wonder if Tim wants to speak for a few minutes about different parts of North Carolina whilst I just take a short break here.
I sure can do that, Nathan. For residents that are living in North Carolina, up from Duck all the way down to Wilmington and further inland, you are looking at a different variety of threats. Obviously, we have the hurricane watch that does go from the North Carolina border all the way up to Surf City, and the storm surge watch for that area as well. The thing that the warnings do not cover are the threats inland, as there are a lot of counties away from the coastline that are under tropical storm warnings, even as far inland as United States headquarters, and that's 80 miles in from the coastline. So if you're in Fayetteville, down towards Lumberton, up towards Raleigh, and east of those areas, getting over towards the Jacksonville, Camp Lejeune, up towards the Morehead City area, You guys are under tropical storm warning, so you could easily get 40 to 70 mile an hour gusts with the impacts of Isaias once it does come through those areas. That's not counting the fact of 4 to 6 inches of rain that we could see in and around some of the rivers and streams of the Piedmont and foothills. So flooding is definitely going to be a real threat with this, along with chances of some power outages from the strong winds knocking power lines down and trees coming down and taking those lines out as well.
Yeah, and someone was asking about the Raleigh area in North Carolina. It's a bit further inland as well if you want to go over that as well.
Yeah, Raleigh is actually 50 miles northeast of U.S. headquarters. Raleigh is going to be right in the same corridor that Fayetteville is going to be. They're looking at 4 to 6 inches of rain. They are under tropical storm warnings. Once you get out west of the Raleigh metro area, out past Durham and points west of there, you are under a tropical storm watch.
Yeah, and also a question about Maryland as well, a bit further out in the time frame, but they are under a tropical storm watch now for most of the state, and significant swaths of Maryland are expecting 4 to 6 inches of rain, with parts of the corridor right now within the center of the state expecting potentially 6 to 10 inches. So it really depends on your exact location if you're asking about Maryland.
Yeah.
So make sure you're staying up to date with your local weather office for the latest there, because if you're really all the way at the far western tip of the state, north of parts of West Virginia, then you could technically get 0 to 1 inches or 1 to 2 inches. But if you're in parts of the more populated area of the state, you could be seeing potentially 4 to 6 or 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. So stay up to date with your local weather office for the latest in that regard.
And just to show you that graphic once again, now that I'm back here, you can see the rainfall amounts there. If you were looking earlier today on this morning stream, for instance, it was only yellows on inland in the eastern United States, and now we've got some oranges there, so that's 6 to 10 inches, as I previously pointed out. The yellow area is, it's complete all the way through from South Carolina to Massachusetts, and slight little bits further towards the northeast as well. This could be quite a significant rainmaker, this storm.
Yeah, I mean, it's already shown itself to be able to cause a rain, especially, as I said previously, with the stream in Hispaniola and those in Puerto Rico, where it did cause damages with rain. And I feel like it could happen again, especially with looking at the amount of rain that's going to fall all the way from South Carolina to almost up to Vermont. It's going to be quite insane.
And just again to note, there is a significant flash flooding risk associated with this storm, all the way from South Carolina, significantly up into the mid-Atlantic, up through New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and a slight chance of at least 10% through very large portions of New England as well. As the storm's passing very quickly through the northeastern United States, as it gets picked up by this trough, a lot of that rainfall could be coming down in a very short time frame. So if you're in a very flood-prone area for flash flooding, make sure you're prepared for this system. And someone was also asking about Washington, D.C. They are under tropical storm watch right now.
Are they?
That's what they were asking. So stay up to date with the national.
I didn't know that.
Well, they are in the coastal area between Maryland and Virginia, so the watch does extend to them. So stay up to date with your local weather office and the National Hurricane Center to see how those warnings evolve and change over the next day as the track for the Mid-Atlantic gets more solidified.
Yeah, definitely. Another question I was saying, could this rapidly intensify once it's over the Gulf Stream?
Well, it is over the Gulf Stream, and so far it hasn't.
Yeah, that was what I was saying. Yeah, my bad.
We've talked about this several times, but people sometimes just look at the warm water and assume, well, this is going to get really strong. There's atmospheric factors that are going to have significant impacts. Right now, the system's under 25 to 30 knots of wind shear, taking convection to the north and east of the center. That's very high levels and can be extremely disruptive to a tropical cyclone, and that's why most of the convection is north and east of the center of circulation, and why there's no tropical storm force winds in the southwestern quadrant. Those really shouldn't abate until it makes a turn towards the northeast and northeast, and even then it's only going to really have about 12 to 18 hours in more favorable conditions to potentially re-strengthen back to a minimal hurricane. So is it possible this becomes a minimal hurricane again? Yeah, it's in the range of possibilities. There's a reason the National Hurricane Center has issued a hurricane watch for portions of the Carolina coastline, but the odds of rapid intensification will be extraordinarily low.
I've even received an email right now from Noah. What is the projected impact on Raleigh and when? So hopefully you're still watching and we can give you the answer. Tim, what do you think?
It really depends on, as we've been talking about, if it's going to get its act together. I know I was looking at the NHC cone earlier, and impacts are looking between Monday night and Tuesday morning in and around the Fayetteville, Raleigh area. So you're talking probably late evening, early Tuesday morning for those that are able to go out and about as essential workers. Don't be surprised if the I-95, I-40 corridor through the Raleigh area, if it's not a total mess with the heavy rains from Isaias impacting those areas. Definitely allow yourself a little bit of extra time during the morning and evening rush hours if you do have to travel in and around the Raleigh area and the suburbs.
Yeah, it's something that should be taken seriously because as we've seen on a bunch of these cams, people are still going to the beach during this. If you live in Florida or in the future, the next couple of days, if you live in the Carolinas, please don't go outside. All right, be safe, be cautious, and be aware.
And there is one of the cameras right now. You keep telling me, and I keep forgetting where that actually is.
Melbourne, Florida.
Melbourne, Florida. Still looking very blustery there, but you... well, actually, the storm is probably just about at its closest proximity to that location now, and it should start moving away. It'll be pretty slow. But
yeah,
those people don't seem to mind.
No, one's already starting to walk right over.
I mean, you know, that's a little risk. If you go into the water, that's a big risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now Daytona Beach, there are 2 people right now in the waves. The tides have been growing gradually, as I was saying earlier. But yeah, it's definitely going more and more inland into the beach.
Let's just see if we can get that on our screen as well. The camera from Daytona Beach, much quieter even now. Obviously, it is getting later in the evening. Just a handful of people out there in the waves. Looks rather quiet. A few clouds in the area. They did have a few downpours not so long ago, just north of this location, I believe. And that is now moving well inland.
Yeah.
Long Island and parts of southern New England, if we want to go over the potential impacts for those areas now,
Sure.
which are much more clear. If you're on Long Island, it's not going to be too different than if you're in portions of southern New England, like southwestern Connecticut. Like I'm sure plenty of people are. The current rainfall forecast right now, the worst of the rainfall is expected to be west of Long Island, a bit more into western New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, up into New York. But you could still see 2 to 4 inches of rainfall in Long Island, according to the latest Weather Prediction Center forecast. And portions of southern New England can easily see that as well, with splotches of potentially 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, a bit more upstate in Connecticut, reaching into western Massachusetts and far southern Vermont. Tropical storm force winds are possible as well. There is a reason the tropical storm watch is there. The track right now that was on screen basically brings a bullseye track with this system over parts of far western Long Island at the moment. That can obviously change, and the cone of uncertainty exists for a reason. So the wiggle room with that's going to matter a lot in terms of where the worst impacts are occurring up in southern New England and New York. So keep an eye out with the National Hurricane Center's cone changes in your local weather office to see how they're changing what they're expecting for your exact location.
Let's now cross over to the Western Pacific, because Tropical Storm Hagupit is currently located on the screen here, so I'll have to take that caption off just for a brief moment. And you can see it's moved over the southernmost Ryukyu Islands of Japan. Ishigaki, I believe, is just passed over there, getting towards visible imagery. That looks like it's on the borderline of becoming a typhoon shortly, and it will continue towards the northwest. GFS was quite keen on this storm developing to about this strength, and a landfall in eastern China, probably as a significant tropical storm. The imagery is all wrong on that one. Let's scroll down, you'll see the storm, there it is, in a wider view in relation to Taiwan. It's just off the coast, but it's just passed over some of those very southern Japanese islands. So I thought I'd just bring that up with you. We're really dictated by whatever you guys want questions answered on. So if people do have questions on Hagapit right now, you can get them in as well. Start your message with Force 13, and there are a few there. What are the chances of it becoming a typhoon quite significant? Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I want to quickly mention that this is relating to the tornado warning. It's now observed, so if you are in those areas, please get into your shelters.
In Massachusetts?
You have 0.
Yeah, in Massachusetts. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up.
All right, we'll get on that.
That is confirmed, Nathan. That is for Hampden and Hampshire counties in western Massachusetts. Confirmed tornado is on the ground in that area at this time.
Oh dear.
I've seen imagery of tornado damage and tornadoes on the ground on our Discord server.
Already?
Yes.
Well, there it is. So if you're curious about this right now, it's not actually fully related to Isaias, but you can see it there, that tornado warning, which is now confirmed. It is this one, yeah?
Yes, it is.
Some questions coming in now about Hagapit, actually, now that we brought it up.
Okay.
Asking if it'll become a typhoon, and someone's asking if it could hit the Shanghai area as well.
I mean, it won't be a typhoon by the time it gets there, but it could strike the Shanghai region. Shanghai is the obviously on the eastern part of China. It's quite hard to explain exactly where it is. I know where it is. It's on that sort of like the in-between bit that juts out in between those two other bits. I don't know how to explain it. But the storm could end up throwing up towards that area and could deliver copious amounts of rain.
And well, now you say that, a question from David Sedlius. Wait, no, not from him. From Matthew Jones. What are the chances of it being a typhoon?
Well, as I said, moderate, I would say. And his name actually earlier was David Sebelius, I believe. Whether it could hit Shanghai, we answered that. And Declan asks, could it rapidly intensify? Not a huge amount. But we'll take questions on either of the storms, but most of the coverage tonight will be on Isaias, and I think we'll be running up until the end of this hour on this.
I do see a question.
Have we got recon information anywhere?
I'm following the recon. We
Yeah,
had
Jay's
drop
got-
bond in it, and it's confirmed that the pressure is at least stabilised. It found 995 millibar with 22 knot winds. The more reliable Air Force plane that's on its way is currently somewhere it's just exiting the Panhandle region and entering the peninsula. Should be there in around half an hour's time for the first center fix.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question I'm seeing. I'm sorry. What are the ACE rates for Isaias right now?
The what? Sorry.
Accumulated
The
cyclone
ACE.
energy.
Yeah, cumulative cyclones.
I'm not aware what it is for Isaiah specifically, but the season as a whole recently crossed 28.
It's probably getting up towards 7 or 8 points, I would think. I don't know. I've not seen it.
And someone's asking a question about Hagapit as well, and it's going to be pretty nice just to clear this up real quick, because I'm sure some people are a bit concerned about the potential impacts to South Korea, considering the cone. I don't know if you can pull up the Joint Typhoon Center's warning cone for this, or the forecast cone.
Wasn't planning to have it, actually, so I wasn't expecting this on tonight's stream.
Okay. Well, generally, the forecast from computer models and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is that it's going to weaken precipitously over eastern China, and that the conditions in the Yellow Sea, once it leaves China and the center of circulation tries to move towards the North and South Korea border region, won't be conducive for any re-strengthening, and that should really die off when it gets towards there. So a potential rainfall threat to some degree, but you won't be expecting any significant winds in the Koreas associated with this storm.
In case you've joined us and you're confused, there are 2 tropical cyclones active. Tropical Storm Isaias, and here's Tropical Storm Hagapit.
Nathan, I do have that Joint Typhoon Warning Center graphic up.
Oh, goody.
And what I was trying to point out, when we were going to recon is ATCF for the 18Z had Hagapit at 50 knots, 990 millibars, and
That's what we went with at first.
And has Isaias at 60 knots, 994. So that's really going to be interesting to see what the recon and NHC go with.
So again, there's that Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecast. Obviously, that's not Tropical Storm Isaias. We are covering two systems at the same time, and both of them could be quite difficult because this one, actually, Hagapit, is threatening 22 million residents mainly in China along the east coast, potential for 60-mile-an-hour winds. But over in the Atlantic, there are 32 million people under a 10% chance for 60-mile-an-hour winds from Tropical Storm Isaias, and you can see again the Tropical Storm Watch and Warning Zone extends almost all the way from end to end on the eastern coast. Almost.
And a question in chat, it's going to be nice to clear this up real quick as well. Someone's saying, do you think Isaias could miss the Carolinas at this point in time? Unfortunately,
so.
It's a pretty clear-cut no. It would actually have to go
Cone is
outside.
shifting. Cone is
It's
shifting
true.
a bit. If it follows the very eastern periphery of the cone there, it is just scraping the outer banks, but a bit optimistic at the minute.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
the
and-
notable thing is still, that the larger impacts are going to be on the northern side of the storm. So even if it somehow manages to shift far enough east to where it just misses the Carolinas, significant rainfall and winds could be expected for portions of the coastline regardless of that because of the size of the northern section of the storm for the time being right now. And that is likely going to begin to expand as it heads more northward and starts to interact with this trough more as well. So quite unlikely that would fully miss the Carolinas at this point in time.
Another question about Sinlaku. What about Sinlaku? Well, I can tell you that it's not looking so great. It's well inland over Laos in Indochina and is pretty much gone.
Yeah, and I quickly want to mention a question that was asked probably 5-10 minutes ago. This is from, I forget who it's from, but they were asking about the chances of Hagapit rapidly intensifying.
Yeah, we covered that one. I would say the chances are fairly low. It would be steady intensification for Hagapit, which again you can see on that imagery. And just one other thing to point out there, the South China Sea, a lot of convection left behind from Tropical Storm Sinlaku could actually develop to become another tropical cyclone for southern China and maybe the Hong Kong area.
That sounds very interesting.
Definitely got to
also-
after that.
Also, I have a webcam for Ishigaki-jima, which is right now being impacted by Hagapit. If you want to show it. There's some
we don't have it.
winds going on.
We don't have it at the moment.
Let me stream it.
But in the meantime, another look at Melbourne there. And you can see it seems to have got a little bit cloudier for some reason.
I guess there must have been a little bit of a... Yeah, it actually does. It seems like the wind is also a little bit slowed down since you showed it, I think, 10 minutes ago.
People are coming off the beach now.
That's good, as they should be. But it does seem like it's gotten cloudier. The tide stayed... It looks like it stayed about the same. Maybe
Just
I
look a
can't
bit
really
more
see
rough
it.
by the looks of the waves, but I'm not sure. Oh yeah,
It's
make sure
really
you get all the
eyeballing it.
sand off. Get all the sand off. There he goes.
There we go. I have the webcam now.
Someone's also asking, is it unusual for the Western Pacific to only have one typhoon to date right now? And I think the most notable thing really, at least in terms of activity there more than anything else, is the very slow start to the season. July was the first one without any named tropical cyclones in the Western Pacific Basin in over 100 years. And, I mean, we just had 2 form, and we're up to 4 on the season, but we're still significantly behind usual for this time of year in the basin, right, Nathan?
Yes, and we're looking at this webcam image. This is from one of those Japanese... Ishigaki.
It was Ishigaki-jima.
Which the storm pretty much passed directly over, and it is still doing so actually. So doesn't look well. It's windy and visibility is not particularly high, but it doesn't look all that bad.
I was looking at some data from there earlier, and while the eye was passing over, the pressure was constantly falling, which indicated that it was intensifying.
That's
Which
yeah,
is
that's
parts
quite
and
clear.
On
friction.
microwave data, it had a fairly large eye apparent.
And at this point, actually, on the island, it'll be in the southern side, and I imagine that'll be weaker.
Yes, I would think so.
Yeah.
So that's the other storm that we're tracking, 2 at a time right now. But the main feature obviously remains, at least for now, with Isaias, and we're just about to get the last visible images before sunset. And the last thing we'll be seeing on visible is still blowing up those huge, enormous cloud tops really towards the center there. And I think they might still be a bit displaced to the north.
Overall, the convective activity has still been pushed generally to the north and east of the center, as this wind shear still takes a toll on the overall structure of the system. But at least at the center, there's more convective activity than we were seeing earlier today. Fortunately, the western side and southern side are still pretty bare.
Can't actually overlay satellite imagery on this screen, unfortunately, but if I could, you would probably see something that looks a little bit like this. This is the blob of convection, and as you can see, the biggest point of it is this area here, the red zone, and the center of the storm would actually be somewhere around here, maybe a little bit further north than that, and that is the area that needs the eye wall all around it, but all we've got really is this staggered potential eye wall, which is up towards the northeast. Really, you would want to see a curved area of yellows and maybe even oranges all around what would be the eye if we actually had an eye wall there.
Yeah, and actually the
something to note.
Yes. With regards to this storm, I commented earlier on how the vortex at the center was tilted with height. It appears that the low-level and mid-level centers have been steadily getting closer together over the day, and if they do align, that would allow for intensification. About 10 or 15 minutes ago, Hank, one of our hurricane experts, said that he estimated they were only displaced by 30 nautical miles, which is a significant reduction compared to
30?
30 nautical miles apart now.
Okay. So, in essence, if they align, then you're talking about intensification continuing, because this is what them first misaligning is what weakened the storm so dramatically when it moved over Andros Island.
Yes. It would allow it to ventilate and breathe and become healthier.
And before you know it, you'll have a Category 1 hurricane again, if that was to happen.
Pretty much.
It'll probably be difficult for them to fully realign when shear's still going to be trying to push the centers apart. We're still under 25 to 30 knots of shear, but if it doesn't get too separated or separate further from now to about late tomorrow morning, early tomorrow afternoon, when it's going to turn more towards the northeast, then there's the odds that it could align better. You get some minimal strengthening back to a Category 1 hurricane, and that's why those hurricane watches are up for portions of the Carolina coastline. So to answer someone asking what are the odds of it strengthening back into a hurricane, it's not currently forecast by the National Hurricane Center overall, but they do expect that it is a possibility, and that's why hurricane watches are in place. And I think there's something we just got to disavow really quick. Someone's trying to say,
go ahead.
What are the chances of this crossing over Florida and going to New Orleans? That's an absolute zero. So I don't know who's trying to tell you that's going to happen, or what models you're looking at. Maybe there's statistical models, 1 or 2, that try to pull it that way.
Yeah.
But those aren't actually based on the current conditions around the storm. There's a trough coming in that's starting to pull this more aggressively towards the northeast and the northeast as we get towards tomorrow. You can actually see some of the clouds associated with that trough over parts of Alabama right now on that visible satellite imagery. And that system is what's going to pull this up along the eastern seaboard of the United States. So absolutely not for this crossing into the Gulf of Mexico and then go to New Orleans. That would be something so extraordinarily rare and unexpected that it would have to deviate about 20 times out of standard deviations at minimum to really get there at this point.
The National Hurricane Center will be updating on the storm shortly. The 8 p.m. advisory isn't too far away. The last advisory from 5 p.m. had 70-mile-an-hour winds and a pressure of 994. Do we see any reason that this might change at the 8 p.m. update?
I don't see any reason to change that for now. Recon hasn't got in there yet. And, well, the one drop sond we had supported keeping it at 994.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the Flagler Beach webcam, which is in Cape Canaveral. In Port Canaveral, which seems to be it seems to be raining, and and the sea is kind of on high tides.
We can't see that one, but again, going back to Cobro's screen from Melbourne, you can see that the waves getting in closer, I think.
I think they are marginally. I don't know if this is because of Isaac. I probably is a little bit, but Isaias. Sorry. Or if it's just generally becoming high tide or a mix of both. But in my opinion, I think it's a mix of both happening.
Yeah, I mean, could someone find out when those high tides actually are? Because I did have the data with me a couple of days ago, but this storm has moved pretty slow and we're a bit out of date on that. It must be getting in at this point.
While you're looking up for that, while people are getting that real quick, someone asked a question about Charleston, South Carolina. They're currently under a tropical storm warning right now, according to the latest update from the local weather office. So keep an eye out for that. Tropical storm conditions are expected there. That's why they'd have a tropical storm warning in place. And some rainfall accumulation of 4 to 6 inches is currently forecast there as well. So stay up to date with your local weather office to see if any changes from those occur. And conditions either look to be more likely to be worse or slightly better. It's really going to depend exactly on how this track wiggles a little bit over the next 12 to 24 hours as the storm continues to approach the Carolinas. But adverse impacts with the risk of flash flooding are definitely there for Charleston. So stay up to date with your local weather office for the latest on that.
I got the tides for Melbourne right now. It's essentially is about high tide right now. It's 8:05 when it's high tide, so it's getting just about there.
Yeah, half an hour.
Yeah, and I now have webcam for Cape Canaveral. It seems to be windy.
Yeah, it looks like it.
The tides are high. Yeah, kind of windy, I would say. It's kind of weird to see so many people driving because I've seen about.
I can just saw a car go by there at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah,
and another
car going on. Yeah, it's kind of weird, and another one.
Another.
So it's kind of weird to see so many people driving around with.
And it's clearly raining quite heavily there now. Do we know exactly where that is?
That's Flagler Beach in Port Canaveral.
All right.
Yeah.
So you can see the tides there and heavy rainfall by the looks of things right now. I'm not seeing really any areas on the radar suggesting that kind of weather, but I suppose so. This is somewhat close to the center of the storm, around 50 miles or so.
Yeah, it's the area where the convection was already trying to make like some sort of landfall.
What was that?
What you're seeing off of Flagler Beach is some of the feeder bands coming in.
Yeah.
As for the wave action, I was looking off of radar earlier. We are seeing some winds coming onshore, 25, 30 miles per hour. So that is pushing some of those waves in. That's why we are seeing off of that Flagler Beach webcam, maybe 3 to 5, 5 to 7 foot waves once you get about maybe 100 yards out into the water there. And speaking of the tides, if the NHC cone does hold up...
Got to interrupt, Tim. The update's out from the National Hurricane Center at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Winds of 70 miles per hour still at this point and a pressure of 993, so they've brought it down by 1 millibar. Whether that has any significance or not, I'm not sure. 28.2 north, 79.7 west, which puts it 55 miles east-southeast of Cape Canaveral and 385 miles south of Myrtle Beach. No changes in the watches and warnings, so we're still as we are 3 hours ago.
Yep, and just in general, the storm continuing to parallel the Florida coastline with impacts again, as we've seen from these webcams, trying to lap onto the coastline and try to reach barely onshore and inland. But fortunately, the general worst impacts associated with Isaias have remained a bit offshore, and that's a really lucky situation to see unfold, considering some of the cones from yesterday. Someone's saying they're asking about Sanford, Florida, which is a bit northeast of Orlando, but also a bit inland. The worst impacts there would probably occur within the next several hours now, because the southwestern side of the system is still very bare. So,
I mean, there might not be any worst impacts, honestly. We can't guarantee that it's going to get any worse than anything you've seen today.
Yeah, I mean, as of 2 p.m. Eastern time, they were expecting that area to potentially get an additional 2 to 4 inches of rainfall. But what we're seeing right now is generally anywhere other than the exact coastline, just more squally activity and outer bands trying to push inland over the state a bit. So fortunately, it hasn't been too much of a significant event anywhere other than the exact coastline. But stay up to date with your local weather office in case something unusual happens and a new warning or watch comes into place for your location.
So there we are, looking once again at the webcam at Melbourne. I've remembered it now. Getting darker there, but that's not necessarily because of worsening weather conditions. It is starting to get late in the evening now. Sunset just around the corner. And the tide shouldn't be too significant. It won't cringe on the land areas too much beyond the beach.
No, you're mainly going to see normal high tides, which will be peaking about 20 minutes. Wave action is still going to be pretty significant. Speaking of the tides, and I'll have to see what the NHC cone looks like, but if it still keeps Myrtle Beach in play, we would be looking at a low tide landfall on Tuesday morning. And you did ask about that satellite radar overlay. I do have that available for you, Nathan.
Oh, that was a while back. Yes, let's take another
look. I'm now showing Port Canaveral webcam, which seems to be unusually calm.
Let's just grab a look at that as well.
Never mind. Something's going on.
Oh, it's gone.
It seems like
happened to me
it's
on
not
this
reaching me.
website. It's really annoying.
All right, so should I change my website?
Webcams are probably in high demand right now.
Yeah, it's the PDZ TV one that doesn't work for some reason.
Yeah. Let's go back to Tim's imagery. I just wonder if you wanted to point anything out on that imagery there.
Yeah, Nathan, it's pretty much indicative of what we've been discussing since we've been on the air here. You can see some of the convection that is to the northeast of the center. The center of it's probably right where my crosshair is at. Yeah.
I'm getting concerned, Tim. You look at this imagery and you're seeing more of it wrapping around. You've almost got a horseshoe now.
Yeah, that is the concern. But again, what we've been discussing is the southwestern side and the western side is devoid of convection. And that's where we've been seeing little to no winds. But as that is starting to wrap in, we may see some of that convection and some of that wind start building back in on the western side. So it'll be interesting to see what the NHC finds with their recon.
On that point, recon is almost there, but with regards to the radar, it appears that the vortex continues to become better aligned with one another.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yes, I'm just finding out that Isaias is likely to interact with the upper level jets to the north and west and gain increased upper level divergence and could potentially give it a chance to intensify. It would be the same feature that allowed Humberto last year to hit Category 3, and I'm not saying this is going to do that at all, but given that it's going to have that to help it, it would have a significantly better shot against the ship.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I now have webcam up once again on a different website. So unusually calm. That's something I can see. Of course, there's some wind, but there doesn't seem to be any rainfall so far.
And back to Kay's note again.
Yeah, go ahead.
With some of the interactions with the trough and other baroclinic activities. Overall, right now, I'm pretty sure the National Hurricane Center has definitely been keeping an eye on that. They're not really expecting that to intensify the storm further from its current location. Although, again, they are noting the possibility of a hurricane landfall in the Carolinas. That's why they do have a hurricane watch. But they did note in their latest forecast discussion about 3 hours ago that such baroclinic forcing and interactions could allow the storm to weaken much slower than you would expect for a storm that's going over land for significant time periods as it moves inland from the Carolinas all the way to Maine on their latest forecast cone without weakening any more than 25 miles an hour in sustained winds as of their latest intensity forecast. And that's pretty consistent with the model envelope as well for forecast intensities. So it's going to be iffy if that really helps it intensify at all while it's still over water. Probably not, according to the National Hurricane Center, but it could allow slower weakening as the storm expands in size and moves up the eastern seaboard. And noting the wind field as well that we're talking about slightly, National Hurricane Center is expecting that by the time it makes landfall, that there will be some tropical storm force winds on the southwestern quadrant at that time.
It would sort of have to be if it's going to make a run for hurricane status.
Well,
Yeah,
we've had hurricanes before. We've had Barry, of course.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. Coming back
We do
once
have a
again
pretty
for the...
interesting just come in off of our Discord chat, Nathan.
Okay.
Our very own scout researcher, Isaac, was able to get us a nice still image of Isaias as of about 13 minutes ago, and this does look very impressive.
Let me just try and get that.
Imagery.
So that was 13 minutes ago or so. You can see quite the high quality there. Most of the cloud tops still offshore.
Significant cloud burst evident, though.
Yeah. Come back once again for Port Canaveral. The sea is very calm. That's something that is kind of unusual. And there doesn't seem to be any rain, but there's definitely some wind. As you can see by the palm in the right side.
All right. Yep, looks
Can you see it?
fairly... well, it's overcast. Looks like there's been some rain. It is a bit breezy. You can see it there on the right-hand side of the image, but and the camera's wobbling a little bit there as well. Let's just bring everyone up to speed. So the 8 p.m. advisory did come out, and we brought that to you a few minutes ago. Just to reiterate, 70-mile-an-hour winds is still what they're going with. A pressure of 993 millibars. None of the warnings have changed. And there is the new advisory now. Look at this, actually. The National Hurricane Center's 8 p.m. position is quite some way east of where they would have had it on the forecast cone. They're going to have to shift that cone at 11 p.m. and it's going to move further east.
Yeah, and that's going to be a note, once we get up towards the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast for the rainfall forecast, because if they have to shift the track east, that means those rainfall total forecasts are probably going to have to shift east to compensate for that as well. So you could see the higher rainfall totals of 4 to 6 inches plus if that maintains itself at the new 11 p.m. advisory, shift a bit eastward and maybe start to get over New York City and other population centers that are more on the coastline. Because of the 5 p.m. advisory, those were generally a bit further inland at the time being. We had some questions about Jacksonville, Florida, if anyone wants to answer those real quick, and a few about Charleston as well that I'm sure Tim can answer due to his proximity.
I can answer the Jacksonville one.
I'm not sure we can. Your signal's a bit flaky.
I'll take it
Try
then
now.
real quick.
Try now.
Okay. So, in Jacksonville, Florida, I would say that Jacksonville probably has a good chance of getting some tropical storm force winds, but in rainfall, and that's probably about it. Maybe some storm surge, maybe like a foot.
I don't know. I think the worst they might get is some squalls, honestly.
Yeah, Jacksonville right now is not forecast to get tropical storm force winds, even though they are under the warning. So you should be preparing there as if it will happen. The 5 p.m. advisory had a 4% chance for tropical storm force winds in Jacksonville.
Just 4%?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that's probably decreasing because of how the storm has moved to the east of forecast.
Yep.
The most notable threat would likely be rainfall in the area up to 2 inches, localized maybe a little bit higher. So if you're in a flash flood prone area and you're kind of on the border of 1 to 2, a little bit higher, some of those squall lines can be a bit more risky for your area. So stay up to date with your local weather center that will have the information for your exact location regarding that. And we had a few questions coming about Charleston, South Carolina, that I'm sure Tim can go over as well.
I sure can. Actually, just looking at this 8 p.m. cone, does keep Charleston in that cone of uncertainty where the center of Isaias could come that way. However, certainty right now actually has, with the 8 p.m. cone, a landfall still in and around the Myrtle Beach area as a tropical storm. So unless the convection starts building back in, which it would take a little bit to wrap back in, Charleston may get a little bit of a few squally rain bands, maybe a little bit of wind, but you're probably looking at 1 to 2 inches of rain right now. Unless it really starts wrapping back in and gets its act together, then we could see those rainfall amounts and those threats get much higher.
I think the important thing with this right now, though, is that the National Hurricane Center, the Weather Prediction Center, and computer models are expecting that as this makes its approach to the Carolinas and starts moving over the United States, calling up the eastern seaboard, that the main convective activity and rain bands will be very much the strongest on the northwestern quadrant of the storm as it begins to interact with this trough a bit more. So even if you're west of the center at that point by a decent amount, you could be still getting some heavier rainfall totals. I don't know if you can pull up the latest rainfall total forecast from the NHC alongside the forecast track, Nathan, but if you do so, that paints a good picture of where
let's see,
band to be. Just because, it actually paints a good picture having them side by side of where they're expecting the rainfall threat to lie, a bit west of the center of the storm. And that's going to be mostly in relation to that convective activity.
Yeah, you can see that
they're
there.
expecting mostly to the north and west of the center.
You seeing that now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's a really good depictor of it because you can see, let's say 2 p.m. Tuesday, they're expecting this to be over, the Virginia Peninsula, parts of Maryland and Delaware around that time frame. But the worst rainfall associated with it at that time, they're forecasting to be further west, inland into potentially more populated areas of Maryland. So just a hint that even though the track of the storm looks like that on the left side of the screen, that impacts do extend significantly away from the center. Always keep that in mind.
And significantly outside of the cone as well.
That's true, especially at the very starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big starting point.
Very true on that point. Now that I've actually seen the Weather Prediction Center's cone at 4:30 versus the NHC cone, Charleston's actually got a little bit higher risk. They are in that orange, which is, I believe, that 6 to 10 inch area. And that does really illustrate your point, Strat, that the northwestern side is going to be the higher threat quadrant when it comes to Isaias making potential impacts and eventual landfall.
Yeah, and again, like we've said, where exactly it goes is going to matter, a good amount. We've seen this wiggle with the cone to the east at the 8 p.m. advisory, with it going a bit east of where they're expecting it. So that exact direction and location is going to matter significantly for at least the worst winds, and for that kind of swath of land right now from South Carolina to even up into Vermont, where they're expecting 4 to 6 inches of rain. How far east or west this goes as it goes up the coastline is going to be very important in determining where the worst flash flooding concerns are going to end up being.
I mean, it's gonna be something to focus on if you're in any of those areas, something to be prepared for, and something to definitely be cautious of.
Nathan,
go ahead.
I have some news from the NOAA recon.
Okay.
That's been in there. Its readings seem to show that the low and mid-level sensors are almost completely aligned now, with the lowest wind maxima happening in the same place.
Oh dear. That's not good news.
And the radar
Definitely
appears to show the mid-level convection wrapping around the central point rather than just rotating over it.
Yeah, I thought I saw that as well. It's that's not a good sign for the future of this, and that means it could intensify into a hurricane in the next couple of days. It moves towards the Outer Banks and North Carolina. Well, I'm talking Outer Banks. It might be heading that way later on if that track continues to shift east.
Yeah,
but
of course, the longer it's over water, the better chances, perhaps.
But for tonight, we are now out of time. Thanks very much for the support that we've received during this event so far tonight and during the last few days. Quite amazing, actually. We hope we're doing a good job. And we'll still be doing plenty more over the next few days as well. And you can follow us on social media for updates in the interim on Facebook and Twitter. Search Force 13 all in text. Strat, what happens now?
Well, once this stream ends, after a few minutes, if you're on the link youtube.com/force13/live, it'll, when you refresh the page after a couple minutes, it'll redirect to our automated stream automatically. We do have this automated stream that gives a 24/7 feed of satellite imagery, updated graphics and information, And that's actually the pinned comment now. So if you still want to get some of the information in a graphical form, make sure to go there. It'll be posted again as well. And it's actually the top thing in the description of this live stream as well. So if you want to get latest information from that stream, make sure to go there. And overall, thank you so much for watching. We really hope we've been helpful, at least in some way. And if you really think so, hitting the subscribe button is always really kind to us. And if you are on the path of Isaias, as I'm sure plenty of people on the Eastern Seaboard that are watching this are, please stay safe, up to date with the latest information from your local officials about your exact location, and stay prepared.
And you can join our community of fellow storm trackers and just generally concerned people right now on our Discord server, discord.gg/Force13. Take a look, and yeah, there's plenty going on there right now. I can certainly assure you of that. I'm sure we'll be back tomorrow because I don't think this storm is going to die. So until then, have a good evening. Good night.